Welcome to the I Believe podcast and a Cure in Sight production, brought to you by Castle Biosciences. I'm your host, Danae Peterson, a fellow ocular melanoma survivor. Here on the podcast, we'll be sharing information and insights on treatments, research, and living with ocular melanoma.
Castle Biosciences is a proud sponsor of this I Believe podcast. Castle Biosciences tests are designed to provide clinicians precise and personalized tumor information for the benefit of patient care. If you would like more information about how Castle is transforming the treatment of eye cancer, visit castletestinfo.com.
Welcome to the I Believe podcast. I'm here today for a conversation with Lisa, who actually I met at the 5K looking for a cure in Arizona last year after she and Mark had moved here. So I'm going to let her tell you guys a little about her and her husband's story. Mark is actually the patient, and so we're interviewing Lisa, the caregiver, today. And of course, she's a caregiver, but first and foremost, I think she would say she's a wife and a mother and so many other things like that make up her story outside of her and her husband living with this cancer diagnosis. So, Lisa, thank you so much for being here. Do you want to tell us just a little about you, where you're from, where Mark is from, and what this journey has kind of looked like so far?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm Lisa, and my husband Mark was diagnosed with ocular melanoma in 2011, and he was diagnosed with Mets in 2020. And prior to the Mets, we kind of lived a carefree life, raised 4 children, 3 boys and a girl, and just lived our life as normal people.
I love it. Thank you. So I know this has been, there's a lot of things we could talk about in just kind of offering the caregiver's perspective and just I guess we talked about this before, but we want to kind of be clear that Lisa's perspective is just one perspective, and there are so many different ways that people feel this, that everybody experiences this, and we know and we're sensitive to the fact that obviously patients have a unique experience and caregivers have a unique experience. And I think what we're trying to maybe bring home is the idea that, or what I would like to convey to everyone who's listening, is just this idea that one experience and one person's feelings does not invalidate the other person's experience. They can both exist. They can both be hard in different ways and for different reasons. And they can both, have their ups and downs. And we, I think, are all, I as a patient am valid in feeling the way that I feel, but my caregiver, my husband, my mom, my sisters, they're all valid in feeling and being impacted by this cancer and this diagnosis the same as anyone else who is a patient. Is it the same? No, it's not the same, but we do feel it. And I think that, the way that you feel it is not any less important than the way that I feel it. I think that that's part of being human. We talked about how we're, big empaths and we feel things big. So let's just talk about, when Mark got his initial diagnosis, so first time you found out there was a tumor in his eye, how did this affect you? Just mentally, emotionally, and kind of what went through your brain at that moment?
Well, it's kind of hard to go back to that time. I will tell you that initially we were really scared, but we didn't know how big this could get, I guess you could say. We just kind of went to the doctor's appointments, did what they said. We knew that this part of it was curable. We knew that the eye tumor was going to be taken care of, hopefully. But we had great hope and great faith in our doctors. And so we just kind of went for the ride. And I remember, a lot of crying and, that kind of thing, but mostly it was kind of a positive thing. We waited for basically doctor's words as to, this is your next step. This is what you need to do. And we just followed the protocol. It wasn't until Mets that the panic really struck. And I will tell you that, we just put our heads down. I tell people we put our heads down and just buried ourselves in social media, in books, in speaking to people all across the world, basically. I had no problem picking up the phone. Mark had no problem picking up the phone and just really trying to disseminate how do you navigate this? And the one thing that I will tell you is that we were panic stricken. And because we got the diagnosis that we went to a oncologist in Portland, and he basically told Mark, you have 6 months to live. I remember sitting in those chairs, and we were just like a number. I felt like a number. Here you go, sit down. My next patient's probably has lung cancer, and then my next patient. There was no real OM expertise there, and I could feel it from the beginning. And to be told that he has 6 months to live, um, and he even kind of said that even with treatment. I remember asking specifically, is there anything on the horizon that's kind of coming out that's new? And his exact words to Mark and I were, there's nothing I'm excited about. And we walked out of that appointment. Uh, we're typically, Tiggers in life. And then we walked out as Eeyores that day and just cried and cried and cried. But we put our heads down. Took about 3 months to kind of rise above the mist, I guess you would say, and just we learned to navigate. And one of the things that I want to get across here today is that I wish that there was a better way for people to be able to navigate when the clock is ticking, and when you're giving this diagnosis, you need resources. And I wish somebody would have just maybe handed me a piece of paper in the doctor's office and said, look, you're not stuck in this office here. There's things out there, and here's what I know. The problem is they
Yeah,
don't
no,
know.
that's such a challenge for sure.
And so it
Well,
is.
and
It
it's hard
is.
too.
So as a
Like, I mean, yeah, I
caregiver,
was gonna say, as from a caregiving perspective, I mean, it's one thing as a patient to be sitting in those shoes and to feel like, you're basically being told you have an expiration date and that it's because of this. And it's like, and for a doctor, I want to make sure that we're being clear that like this is what happened to Lisa and Mark. And so
to me,
this is not
yeah, this
everyone's
is me.
experience. Some oncologists deliver the news
Yeah,
far better. And obviously we do have some really great melanoma, like uveal melanoma
yeah,
focused oncologists. There's, a handful of them throughout the
yes.
country, and more of them are kind of popping up, and there's definitely some progress being made in the
Mm-hmm.
oncology world where uveal melanoma is a topic of
Yeah.
discussion. But 2, 3 years ago, or I guess we could even argue 4 years ago for you guys, it wasn't a topic of discussion at the same level that it is now. And so you guys were told you have a limited amount of time, and this is very much what your guys' reality was. And so like, yeah, that would be horrifying. Like, that's not what I was told. That's not what most people these days are told in a uveal melanoma oncologist's office.
Right.
But you guys didn't have that experience. You
Right.
guys had an experience with someone who
No.
had very minimal
No.
experience and exposure to and who really just didn't take the time. If they had the capacity to, they didn't take the time to really delve into more, because it's rare and it's small. And he probably only has ever seen one uveal melanoma metastatic patient, or maybe two,
Right.
in his entire career. Like,
Well, and he basically said, we have one thing we can do, and you can
which
do
is
Ipinevo.
obviously, I
And
mean, you and I
right.
know, like, and many patients know sometimes that can work, but it doesn't sometimes, or there's debates on what should be the frontline treatment and if that's a good frontline treatment. And anyway, but I'm sorry that you guys were essentially kind of written off like that, because that
Yeah.
sounds
So
really frustrating.
it took a turn for the worse in the beginning. It affected the children, it affected me, it affected my son just keeps chiming in here. It affected the entire family. And again, that doesn't negate how Mark felt. That must have been I mean, I know it was because we talk about it. It had to have been the most gut wrenching feeling. We talked about this the other day, Danae, you have hopes of, we were 2 years out from being empty nesters after raising the 4 kids. And so you have an idea of the way your life is supposed to look, right? And the story has been written, so you think, because that's how you kind of go through your life. You have all these little milestones, and you have all these little points in your life where you go, hey, we made it to this, or we did that. Well, ours, and a lot of people's, and don't turn out the way that you think that they're going to turn out. And so that's okay. We're in a better spot now, but at the time, it just didn't
Yeah,
feel
I mean, it's
right, and it
devastating
felt
at
like
first.
it's panic. It's panic. And again, as his wife, I want to take that from him. And at the same time, I'm grieving and I'm feeling like I'm not supposed to say too much because is it about me? Well, yeah, it is because we're a family and we're a team, but really he's the patient and I needed him to process first. And so you do end up kind of taking a back seat a little bit. And that was hard. That was really hard. And then the fight came out. After about 3 months, the fight came out, and we were not going to take no for an answer. We found Philadelphia. We were cheering for the Eagles. We're actually Seahawks fans. We were cheering for the Eagles because of the camaraderie and the feeling that we got when we finally made it there. We had to jump through so much red tape to actually get there. And,
And things are coming
I
clear
was just,
from West Coast to East Coast. I mean, literally across the country. Like
yeah,
this is not just
during during the height of the pandemic, mind you. Okay, so first of all, you're navigating COVID. Secondly, you're navigating. We had to change insurances, and when you get the diagnosis that you have 6 months to live, you know how long things take. That red tape to kind of bust through. It was just
I'm sure
something.
it was absurd.
It was absurd, and we kept getting roadblock after roadblock. And then guess what happened? Things started opening up and blessings started to happen. And Mark and I would look at each other and say, okay, we're believers. And we'd say, now that was a God thing. That felt good. That was, your community comes out. And everybody has a different, I know everybody has a different
Well, but I
situation.
mean,
I know people who have
I have a
caregivers
different
that,
belief system. I don't have maybe the same level of religious belief, but I still had almost an identical experience, to be honest, where I had that feeling of panic and that feeling of okay, everything is kind of coming down around me, and it feels like nothing is working out. One thing after another, another thing, another thing, another thing, and it was just
yeah.
like domino effects of crappy things. They just kept happening, and then it just suddenly kind of flipped. And it was like, it's not that everything got better all of a sudden. Like, you still are dealing with
No.
metastatic disease. You're still dealing with some of the same problems that you've been dealing with, except that you start seeing the ways that things are working out for you, even if it's just small ways. And you start to notice
Mm-hmm.
those. And I know I notice those because if I don't notice those, then I'm miserable all the time. Like it helps me to notice those good things and to look for the gifts and to look for, like you said, like those, that was a God thing, or like, that was a tender mercy, or that was a blessing, like whatever it is, like when you find those things, it becomes a lot easier to see them and they build up. And I feel like
Yeah.
it makes it, at least, I mean, for me, and I think for you, it makes it a little bit easier to carry this, a little more manageable.
Yes, because people in life are looking for that little granule of hope. And I know that not everything works out rosy and not everything's unicorns and rainbows. I get that. But what I found is in the very beginning, I was trying to search for that one person, that one little piece of hope. And I'll tell you, I hit a lot of brick walls. And it was kind of the same sentence written all over again. Ocular melanoma, and then it talked about the prognosis. And it was like the same paragraph. Well, I decided I didn't want to read that paragraph anymore. I wanted to read something beyond that. And I did find a couple people that gave us hope. Well, that one little ounce of hope led us to the next ladder, so to speak, the next little step. And that step led us to another opening of maybe talking to another person or that had maybe a similar experience that Mark had where, he's doing well. And sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes Mark will say, I don't want you to put that on social media because I feel like we're bragging. And I'll have to say, you know what, hun? We're not
You're offering
bragging.
hope.
We're giving somebody hope. And bragging about your health and the fact that you have managed to be out 6 months when somebody gave you
Yes, almost 3
3
years.
years when somebody gave you 6 months.
It's not
That's not
something, yeah, it's
bragging. That's a
definitely,
success story.
it's the kind of hopeful story that we want to see that as patients. That's what helps patients like me who were initially diagnosed with Mets and then read your
Yeah.
story or hear from you and are like, okay, deep breath, like I'm going to be okay. Like there is definitely more of a chance that I'm going to be more okay for longer than I initially felt like it would, be possible. But that
And,
hope
and
is
then
because of stories like your guys's and you're being willing to talk about it.
And I've noticed that with you. I'm noticing, I mean, obviously I don't hang out with you, but I
Wait,
see you on
what?
social media and
Texting
I see
doesn't
the
count?
podcast, and yeah, yeah, it does. But I think that when you can sit in your grief, and you can sit in your anxiousness, and you can sit in the remorse and the what ifs, if you can sit with that for just long enough, things do open up. And that's the dogs are gonna bark.
It's okay. They just have to talk to you. It's fine.
Somebody knocked on my door. Come here, come here.
It's okay.
Sorry.
No worries.
I may have to. Nobody even comes to my door. I don't even know anybody. You kidding me? Like, I just moved here. Who knows me?
It's okay.
Do you want me to go get them?
It's fine. I mean, I'll mute. Why don't I mute you, and then we'll just pause for a second. If you think they're good, then
Okay.
there we go. All right, pause. Take a little short break. I'm just gonna sit here and feel awkward on Facebook. It's fine. All right, Lisa will be right back. And Lisa can come back and she can tell us more about this. But if you guys read in their Facebook story, I guess Facebook story, I guess that's what we would call it. In the summary, just kind of talking about, okay, this is what their journey with ocular melanoma has looked like so far. I'll just kind of summarize that for you guys. For anybody who's coming in a little late to his story. So Mark's initial diagnosis was August 2011, and he had a choroidal melanoma in his left eye, class 1A, and he had brachytherapy, September 2011. And then he had metastatic disease discovered in the liver in June of 2020. So obviously, those of us who are familiar with the biopsy, that's one of those, like, we talked about this too, didn't we? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. It's like, what? And so you guys had that kind of change of like, oh, we were supposed to be, prognosis wise, we were told we were the best it could get. So how did you guys both navigate that aspect of like, I mean, did you have to kind of just let it go and just like, okay, well, I guess it was wrong?
Well, yeah, class 1A. And at the time, PRAME wasn't a thing. So we don't know if he's PRAME positive or negative. But I told you this the other day. I did not realize. It never crossed my mind from 2011 to 2020 that he could develop mets. Now, I know that sounds naive, but we would go to our yearly appointments. They would, numb his eye and do the ultrasound and do all that stuff. And they'd say, "You're good, Mark. Nice to see you." Oh my gosh, he'd make them laugh because Mark's a very happy person. And they would say they looked forward to our visits. And that was it. That was it. I mean, for us, he was cured. And I think I told you this the other day. I almost wish that we would have had more conversations with our ocular oncologist and maybe how things were progressing for other people, or maybe what science was saying, because I would have changed some things drastically in our lifestyle had I thought about it more. Now, is it a gift? Maybe it is a little bit of a gift that we didn't think about it. We were able to raise our kids. We were able to,
I mean, you had a
maybe that's a
decent amount of
blessing in
time, for
disguise.
sure.
I don't know how I feel about that. I have two kind of stories. I wish that I would have known more, but I also think it was a gift. If I would have known more, I would have changed some things, and I would have changed maybe how Mark was handling his stress. There was stress in his life. I would have changed some of his we're a team, so the way that we eat. I would look at supplements differently. I would look at really making sure his immune system was built up, because that's when you and I have talked about integrative medicine, it's really about keeping your immune system strong. And we are there now. We are there. I have learned a lot about what we can do to help ourselves. So yeah, it was we got blindsided, no pun intended. We just
And
so
I forgot the math. I
it
was
was
looking
tough.
at the math again of the years. Like, I forgot that he was diagnosed in 2011, and then it wasn't until 9 years later almost that metastatic disease. So I guess if we were looking at some of the data, and we were to hypothesize he probably was PRAME positive. But obviously, PRAME didn't exist at the time,
Yeah.
so it wasn't a test that they could test for.
Yeah.
But based on kind of the trajectory of
Yeah.
what PRAME looks like, a class 1A PRAME positive, it would be somewhere 10 to 15 years is a potential metastasis.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that kind of lines up there with the hypothesis. So, but let's talk a little about like what you kind of mentioned, because I feel like this is an important point. You guys had this kind of, I guess we could almost call it a 3 months of kind of this dark night of the soul almost, where you were just like, okay, everything is like horrendous
Absolutely.
and we don't know how to find hope and we don't know where to look and everything is overwhelming. What do we do? We've been given we have a timeline that's ticking. Like what flipped to help you kind of cope differently and to navigate this in a way that essentially kind of gives you a sense of control? Because I think that's one of the most important things that we do as patients, as caregivers, as families navigating a cancer diagnosis, is coming up with, okay, these are all the things I don't have control of, and these are the things I do have control of. So let's talk a little about kind of some of those things that you have taken the reins on as a caregiver, and that you and Mark have worked together as a team to change, that give you that sense of control.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Those were the darkest days. And I give a 3 month period because that's kind of where we looked at each other and just learned or just realized that we were going to fight no matter what. Whatever we were told, the answer wasn't going to be no to us at all. And I think that the flip came because, I mean, you can only live in darkness for so long, right? How does that feel? You're in cold, rainy weather and you're told you're going to die, and you're looking at your kids, and your children are sad and they have questions, and that's no way to live. That's no way to live. You got to spend your days living. And at that time, we were not living. I mean, we were surviving. I don't even know that we ate. I know that sounds really silly. I'm sure we ate. I don't remember family dinners. I don't remember feeling okay about going to one of our kids' basketball games. I don't remember feeling
Yeah,
anything but
it
numb.
clouded everything
Um,
for that time.
and it was just clouded. And so I think you have to make a choice. You have to make a choice to live and for the day, for that day. And sometimes, I mean, I remember days where it was for the hour, for the hour. I remember calling a couple of my girlfriends and saying, you might want to get a big old spatula at some point because you're going to have to scrape me like a pancake off the ground, because I was just like so depleted and so overwhelmed because I wanted to fix it, you know, as, another word for caregiver is a protector, and I think in our situation, Mark has always been my protector, and we kind of flipped modes, and it was really my turn, raising 4 children. I was already in that mode of being a caretaker and doing, and Mark kind of became my fifth child, not in a bad way at all, but just I wanted to take that on for him. So I was the one that I would be up on all hours of the night. I would just research and research again, trying to find that sense of one little granule of hope. And I was finding it. And Mark would wake up the next day and I'd say, look, I found this. And then we would do something about it. We would make a phone call, or we would, research it a little bit more. And it's like it snowballed. One thing led to the other, led to the other, led to the other. Well, pretty soon, positivity radiated in our lives, and people would say, how are you guys so happy? Like, why are you so happy right now? And I'd be like, well, we're figuring it out. We're
Yeah, like
figuring it out.
you definitely feel like there's, well, and I think we've talked about this before at the run before, but like, just it's not just that you feel like you're figuring it out, like you're seeing something that translates, because like you said, what did you say in the summary of his diagnosis journey, like that he had treatment in December of 2020 for what was it, roughly 10 lesions, or no, 20 lesions for
So he started off,
immunoembolization.
yeah, he started off with 3, very small. I think what do they call it? Sub centimeter? Do you say sub centimeter or sub? I'm the science part.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
don't
good at.
remember the size,
They were
but they're
small.
very, very, very
They
small.
were really small. Yeah, I liken it to one of the sizes, the size of a Cheerio. I'm very visual, so I look things up and I'm like, okay, you have a Cheerio in there. That's the size of the one you have. That's how I mean, obviously our doctors are probably like dying that I say
No,
that kind of stuff, but like,
if it
you have a
helps you make
Cheerio.
sense of it, I think that's important.
It does. So then he went to about 20 mets, like 20, like it just peppered,
Yeah, just like
just
boom.
exploded. And then he went in and he had immunoembolization, and he did the, one side and then the other side a month later. So we did 4 consecutive months. We did September, October, November, December of 2020. Okay. So by the time 2020 was ending, he had
Four
had
treatments or round
round
two. Yeah,
two of
two full
his
rounds.
round two. So then they do scans, right? So they're monitoring to see if what's happening. And Dr. Adamo, because we see Dr. Orloff, she's an umbrella under Sato's team. And Dr. Adamo literally looked at Mark and said, I don't want to say this too loud because there's somebody next to you that's not doing as well. And of course, you have empathy. He said, Mark, they're disappearing. And again, there's your hope. That gets you back on the plane, back home. You can interact with your family. You can have family dinners again. You can live. And it's those kinds of things that have kept
Yeah,
us
just
going.
those little victories, so to
I'm
speak, of just like seeing, okay,
Yes, and
something is helping, something is stable, and just
some
finding the win in it, even if it's not, maybe it's not as big as you had hoped. Would it have been great if 3 months later it was all gone? Sure, but like we'll take half.
yeah, yeah, that's what I pray for. I pray for that. But we live in reality. We're realists. We know what this disease is all about. Um, I'm not trying to say everybody needs to wake up every morning and just be the happiest person in the world, and that's how you should live every single day. You should try, but I don't. Mark doesn't. We have our moments. Um, but as a team, when I'm down, he'll bring me up. When he's down, I bring him up. That's just the way it is working. And um, I just want to offer somebody that glimpse, that one glimpse. And um, even in dark hours, there's something there that is meaningful as to what you're going through, and why you're going through it. And um,
No,
yeah,
that's such
it's
a
it's
it's
been a
such a
ride.
ride for sure. But I hope that, like you said, I hope that this brings people just some hope in the idea of like, okay, here's someone who's doing well. Um, Somebody is asking, is the treatment that he's been doing the Kimtrak treatment? So to clarify, immunoembolization is one of the liver-directed therapies that Dr. Orloff actually talked about on the podcast back in December. You can go back
Hmm.
and you can listen to that episode on the podcast if you head to really anywhere that you can listen to a main podcast channel. Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Podbean. Those are all downloadable apps. And then Spotify as well. And if you search liver directed therapies under the I Believe podcast, or just scroll back to December,
Hmm.
you'll be able to hear her talk about what is immunoembolization and kind of what are the different liver directed therapies. And so Kimtrak is different than that. Kimtrak actually didn't exist as a possibility for Mark in 2020 because it was still in clinical trial, um,
Right.
and
And he
he
doesn't
doesn't qualify.
qualify.
Yeah,
He doesn't
like
qualify.
there's that
No,
blood
he
test
doesn't
that we talked
qualify.
about. We've talked a lot about Kimtrak, so just head over to that if you want to listen to more about what immunoembolization is. One of the things to highlight, and I know that you had wanted to talk about this too, is just this idea that you and Mark have focused on finding a way through navigating this in kind of an integrative way, and that's been really important to you guys. Do you want to share maybe why that's
Yeah.
important to you as a family, and for him, for you individually, like why did that become a decision? Is it just kind of happened that way, or was it a conscious, this is what we want?
It happened through my research, basically, and I'd like to say that I believe in both modalities. I believe in conventional and I believe in traditional, and I believe in marrying them. I'll never discount anybody doing the conventional side, and I'll never discount somebody doing the traditional side. It's really everybody's own individual journey. But for us, um, I knew that making sure his immune system was at top notch was key. So what does that look like? So then you research, right? You just start digging into the books. I call it going down the rabbit hole, and I went down hard. um, so some of the things that Mark does, he does take quite a few supplements, just to boost his immune system, just to make sure his liver is functioning properly. Obviously, we get blood tests to make sure all of his levels are good. Everybody does, but and they're beautiful. They're actually beautiful. Um, he does. I'm looking at my little list here. I made a list. We believe in making sure his body has a good pH balance, and that's something people can research. Is your body acidic or is it alkaline? We practice gratitude. We look at each day and we practice gratitude. There's got to be three things in a day that you're happy for. I don't care if, like right now, I'm happy that my dogs are quiet. And that's part of, I'm happy that whoever I don't know at the door left. That's my practicing gratitude. No, I'm joking,
Well, I
but
mean, you can
it,
find those
you,
things. It's fine. No
yeah,
judgment.
you, speaking to others, there are quite a few people that have reached out to me, and they, again, they want to find that glimmer of hope, and they say, what is Mark doing? What is Mark doing? Well, I can give you all the information about what Mark's doing, and you can compare notes. You can do your own research and kind of, compare and contrast what you need to do. But not every one thing is going to work for the
Yeah,
next
well,
person.
when we talked about
So
that
just
in detail a lot about just this idea that, you and I think many people in the community, in really any cancer community, come to this conclusion where we stop looking for a cure that is the only one and start looking for, okay, what's going to work for my person and what's going to help my person. And
Mhm.
the bizarre, crazy thing is that what works for person A and person B, they might look similar. They might look like the same things should work for them based on kind of some of what science looks at. And then one thing works for one person and a different thing works for someone else, and we don't know why. And that can be really aggravating sometimes, but I think just owning the fact that, like you said, it's such a unique individual journey and everybody's going to do things differently. And just
Mhm.
because one thing works for Mark, like, I mean, there's so many things that Mark does that you told me about that I know. Just kind of to give an example of someone who came to you looking for advice and ideas, I have taken some of those
Mhm.
ideas and I've used them, and I've also just kind of laid aside some of the ones that I didn't feel like jived right, or they didn't feel like they were something that I needed to focus on. Like, I'm just kind of, that's kind of
Yeah.
where I think that intuition as a person comes in, where you just have to really listen and say, okay, what does my body need? What is my body telling me that it needs? And get in tune with
And
that.
it's
Yeah.
changed for
And
us. It's changed. It's probably changed
yeah.
5 or 6 times now. In fact, I just wrote another list. It was
Yeah.
laid out for him
Well,
last
and
Friday
like
when
you
he
said
got
at the
home from
beginning,
work.
like you would research, you would find one thing, and then you'd introduce something. It wasn't this you suddenly just did all of it at once. You didn't like have
No.
20 different supplements and different tests you were doing and different, I don't know, just different lifestyle changes that you implemented all at once. This was gradual. And this was, in connection with, okay, we did 4 months straight of immunoembolization. So I guess I'm just trying to make sure that we kind of like splash it with reality that, like, Lisa and Mark and anybody else who does integrative medicine, they didn't just suddenly get there. They didn't get to that point. They didn't, and really even
Yeah.
just in navigating metastatic disease, like, you don't just get to a point where you are able to function in your life and it just suddenly happens. It's a very gradual process of just peeling back the layers um and really just kind of gradual layers of understanding, whether it's from research or because you're just getting used to your new normal and just kind of learning to accept it. And I think that it all kind of plays a role. But I did have a
It
question
does.
for you, if you're okay to take a quick
Okay.
question. Do you have just a couple off the top of your head, just before we kind of start to close out, a couple of favorite books or documentaries that you've listened to that have kind of
Yes.
inspired some of the changes that you guys have felt empowered by? Because I feel like that's an important thing
Yes.
to highlight, is just that these are changes that you've made, you've done, and whether or not they're the 100% key answer is irrelevant, because you're
Hmm.
empowered. You feel in control. You feel powerful in confronting this as a
Yep.
couple, as a team, as a family. And that makes all the difference in the world.
Well, and again, that list had to evolve too based
Hmm.
on research. So you're talking about books, you're talking about talking to people, that's another list. You're talking about supplements, that's another list. You're talking about oncology, that's another list. And these lists just keep piling up. And yes, I do have I wrote them down because these are my favorite books. I did watch the Heal documentary probably 97 times. Pretty darn amazing. Just pretty darn amazing how your body works, and the function of your liver. I mean, alone
Hmm.
is a miracle. It really is. I loved the Hill documentary. One of the other books I love is called Radical
Yes, I love that
Remission.
one.
Love that book. I think How to Starve Cancer is another one of my favorites. Um, Here's a book that I am not kidding you. It seems so silly, but its title is my favorite title ever. It's called Everything is
Oh,
Figure
I love
Outable.
that book. That's it's a really good book. Actually, I think I have it on my shelf over here
It's
somewhere.
it So just think about that title for a second. I mean, really? Yeah, everything is figure outable. As hard as it gets, as gloomy as it gets, there's little pieces you can
Mhm.
pull. And I'm not kidding you. I feel like I should get a tattoo tomorrow and
No,
that
I
just
love
say that.
that.
I just
That's honestly
love
one of
that
my favorite
saying.
books. So if you needed,
It
you know,
is.
anybody
Yeah.
listening needs a
Yeah,
second opinion to say that book is a really good book, it's a really good book. Has
it is.
nothing to do with cancer
It
and
is.
has everything to do with just that, exactly what it says. Just developing that mindset
It's just
of
navigating.
everything is figure outable. Because if you approach every problem that you confront in life with that mindset that, okay, I don't know the answer right now, and I might not ever figure out the answer, but I can at least chip away at this. This is figure outable. And
Yes.
yeah, I really love that. And just the idea that like,
It sounds like a
yeah, like it
kid.
sounds like a kid word.
Sounds like a little kid. Yeah, I know. Actually makes me happy. That title makes me
Yes, I love
happy.
that.
The other thing is the earthing book.
Okay.
I learned a lot about earthing, and just kind of reconnecting your body to the earth, and regenerating your cells. And some people might think that's whack. That's okay. Um, Mark sleeps on an EMF pad, and he has the pillowcase, and in our mind that works. That's working. So what works for us may not work for somebody else, but when he lays his head down at night, that's something that comforts me as his
Yeah,
caregiver. I'm sure it comforts him. I'm like, okay, he's on his pad like a little kid. He's on his little
it's
blankie
fun.
pad.
I'm just
um
visualizing this though, and I'm
yeah,
like, because I know Mark has
he's
curly hair, so I'm like, oh look at his curly hair on the pillow.
mm,
Like,
I know. My little baby, my little
mm,
fifth baby is on that
no,
little
but
pad.
he's such a neat
Um,
guy though. I'm so glad I got to meet him.
yeah, he's a happy man. And that could be another thing, is just that, when you're happy, that just
And it
maybe
doesn't mean
changes.
forcing yourself to be happy. It means, I guess what I see
No.
is I see someone, I see you, I see Mark, and the people that I know who are happy people. It's because they're intentional about doing the things that bring them joy. And you guys connect. You connect as a family. You connect with your kids. You get outside. You take good care of yourselves. I'm sure there's a bazillion other things you guys are passionate about as people that you engage with. And having that kind of, I mean, just like a joy for life. Like that is, I feel like what brings that light to someone's eyes. Like it's that joy for living and that
Mhm.
desire to just wake up and tackle the day, like with whatever it is that you need to, focus on. Um, well, I am just noticing the time, but I have one more thing I want us to close out with. I want to focus a little on
Okay.
you.
Okay.
So, how do you handle the day to day stress of this diagnosis as a person? Because this does take a toll on you. And I've seen some of the things that you've been doing recently on Facebook, of just kind of like some of the things that you have been doing to really just pull, kind of not pull back, but just kind of separate, okay, here's me in my caregiving role, and here's me in taking care of me.
Mhm.
So what are some of the things that you as a caregiver have found important in self-care, or that help you?
Well, thank you for asking that. It's just been recently that I've been trying to work on myself, as opposed to just kind of looking at this whole thing, this cancer journey, and what does Mark need. And I think it's important for people to focus on themselves a little bit more, and I haven't been doing that. I love animals. I've always loved horses. I love every animal. Mark calls me Dr. Doolittle, because I had the kids, and now that the kids are gone, I'm starting to ask for, like, I want a Highland cow, and I don't think the HOA where I live would
Yeah,
let
I
the
mean,
Highland cow come live in my backyard. But I found a gal here that is letting me go out to her barn, and I get to ride her horse. I get to brush her horse. I get to just look at the horse. That is therapy for me. That's therapy. So I integrate animals. I love music. I just listen to my happy music. I blare it. That helps me a lot. I journal. I don't do it every single day. I'm not as great as I should be, but I do write things down. I kind of organize my notes, and I write down, like, maybe a quote. Quotes are big for me. quotes are very, very big for me. But again, I'm not perfect. I have a lot of bad days. I have a lot of days where I just cry because this has created a change in my life, a change in our family's life. If one person is not in our family, it changes the puzzle, right? The puzzle, there's a piece missing. And I know that we're all going to die. I know that we're not guaranteed tomorrow. I get all that. It's just that I thought our life was going to be different. And so I've had to learn to cope and learn to look at it differently. And then again, be grateful for that day. But there are days that I'm not so grateful. And that's okay.
No, both
That's
things can
part of it.
definitely
That's part
exist.
of
You
what,
can have that kind of newfound acceptance of, I think that the quote that we had talked about was that, like, sometimes you have to let go of the picture of what you thought life would look like and learn to find joy in the story you're living.
Mhm.
But that doesn't negate the fact that you still mourn the story you thought you were going to live.
Every day, every single day, because I love my husband and I love my family. And I just want to grow old with him. And I'm going to do everything I can for him today. And the other part of that is, as his caregiver, there's two pieces. He has to be on board. Okay. This is not something I'm pushing on him. If I find information and I send it to him, he has to engage in it. It has to be a part of what he wants it to be. And some days he's great about it and some days he's not. He tells me he appreciates what I do and how much I research and what I send to him. But ultimately it is his choice. He's the patient, he's the one with the cancer. So it's a work in progress in our family. But I'm here for the long haul, and I will stay for the long haul. And I also want to offer, if anybody else needs me, I'm here. I want to be able to be a part of other people's lives and help them. Whether it's just to talk, that's fine. Whether it's to ask questions about supplements, whether it's to ask questions about the oncology part of things, call me. My phone is open. That would make me happy.
No, I love that. And I'm
Very
grateful
happy.
just that
Yeah.
that you offered that to me, because I know that you and I connected at a time that I was pretty low. And so I mean
I know.
it's been really, I mean, it's been helpful, like you said, to be able to connect with more people and to just kind of, okay, like, pull yourself, over the edge of the hole of like, I call it the pit of despair. That's what when I get in the pit of despair,
It
I'm like,
is.
okay, I gotta like crawl out and like hold on to the edge and be like, all right, who's up here? Who can help me out? Like, and so
No,
thank you for being
I
one of those
can.
people.
I'll help
And
you.
like you said, we'll link up your Facebook and people can reach out to you if they want to connect with you. And I had some other stuff I wanted to talk about, but I think that I'm going to have us cover it at maybe a different episode, or we'll bring in a couple caregivers and maybe patients and do a little bit
Okay.
different of an interview. But Lisa, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our live
You're
audience who
welcome.
listened and just offered some feedback and encouragement. We are grateful for you guys, and we will definitely bring this back as a topic of discussion, just to bring the caregivers in and let's talk. I guess if you are a caregiver and you're open to having a conversation about, I guess what I would like to focus on in the future would just be kind of what are some of the hard conversations you have to have, or that you find yourself unable to have, the topics that get hard to talk about with your person, and vice versa. As a patient, what's hard
Yeah.
to talk about? Like, I think
Let's
that would
do
be
that.
good to kind of offer those
Let's do that.
perspectives. So if you,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm happy to
I
have you come
agree.
on again, Lisa, but if there's anybody else listening who's
Yeah.
interested in being a part of that, please reach out to me and we'll try and do that sometime in the next couple of months. But I actually have to go pick up my kids
Okay.
from school. Wish me luck.
Go get your kids. Thank you for having me, Danae, and I hope you have a
You
lovely
too. Thank you so
afternoon.
much.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the I Believe podcast, brought to you by Castle Biosciences. Please be sure to subscribe, and if you're so inclined, send this episode over to friends, family, and share on your social media to help spread awareness around OM. If you have a moment, leave us a brief review or consider making a donation to the links in the show notes to keep our podcast going. Feel free to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter @A Cure in Sight. We'll see you next time on the I Believe podcast.